What do people mean when they say they're in survival mode? How to move from a survival mode oriented nervous system to a calm and healed nervous system. Then we have this underlying nervous system that you actually have little to no control over, that is more active, and it will always override your own logic. You learn more from what you see rather than what you hear. What will push you to want to do things that might end up being mistakes? Because at the end of the day, sisi, what, like, everything that you do is new. Hello guys, I hope you're all doing great. Welcome to Woman Enough podcast. This is episode 9. This is where we get to learn, figure out ourselves and become the best versions of ourselves. Today we are talking about the nervous system. So what do people mean when they say they're in survival mode? Most people will say, I was in survival mode. But what does being in survival mode really mean? So you can either be in two modes. You can either be surviving or you're resting. Okay, so you're either in survival mode or you're resting. But by resting, I'm not meaning like you're sleeping and you're just chilling. No, I mean like your nervous system is calm and it's cool. So today we're going to be discussing how to move from a survival mode oriented nervous system to a calm and healed nervous system. And also sharing some of the importance of having a healed nervous system. So there are 4 survival responses. Like, these are responses that are elicited by our own nervous system. We have flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. So flight is, of course, to flee, to run away. Fight is to be combative and confrontational about things that are affecting you emotionally. Freezing is when you just go quiet when something triggers you emotionally. And fawning is when you do things to distract yourself from the actual emotion. For example, when somebody does something to annoy you and then you start laughing, that is fawning, because you're trying to combat the fact that whatever has been done has made you feel some type of way with laughing, so that it looks less serious or less impactful to your emotional system. Also, we have 3 parts or 3 types of the nervous system. We have the ventral vagal, we have the sympathetic, and we also have the dorsal vagal. So the ventral vagal is the one that is usually overactive or working too much when you are regulated and you're healed, And when you're operating from the ventral vagal nervous system, it means that you're in your creative space. Creativity is flowing. You're able to create because you don't have emotional blockages. And when you're operating from the sympathetic nervous system, that is when now you're in survival mode. You have anxiety, you have panic attacks, you're overthinking, you want to run away. And the dorsal vagal now is when you freeze and shut down. Like, you know these people, when something happens to them, they just go quiet, they just disappear, they don't say anything. Their dorsal vagal nerve or nervous system is working overtime, right? So what happens is your emotional system or your nervous system does not stay like in a single state. It usually shifts over time, depending on your environment and how you're being triggered, right? So if something happens, for example, something that elicits, let's say, fear, of course your sympathetic nervous system is going to be activated so that your body is able to run away from the danger or fight the danger away. And since now the difference is the problem, not the difference, sorry, but the problem comes in when your nervous system stays at the sympathetic level, like it just stays there. You're always in anxiety mode or you're always in the flight or fight mode. That is where the problem comes in. It's not that we don't want you to ever activate your sympathetic nerve. Of course, it's very important. But also, you have to maintain a proper balance of the three nervous systems, right? And I always say, okay, not that I always say, because it's a fact that your survival instincts will always override your logic any day, anytime. So you can always say that, oh, I'm a calm person and I'm a cool person, but we will see the person that you actually are the day when something happens and you're angry. Now we can see what you do when you're angry, and that will tell us who you actually are, because your logic is there to protect you, right? It's your ego. But then we have this underlying nervous system that you actually have little to no control over, that is more active, and it will always override your own logic, right? So when you're a kid is when you're programmed to know what is threatening and what is not. It's when your patterns are being placed. It's like, I always say that a kid is okay, no, not really, because we do have some inbuilt instructions for sure, but most of our programming happens at a younger age, especially from the age of 0 to 7 years. That is when you get to have your belief system built in you. You get to have your moral code built in you. And all of this is dependent on the people that you spend most of your time with, in most cases being your parents or your guardians, right? And most of the time, you see, teaching somebody, talking, like a parent can always tell you that don't do this, don't do this. But if they themselves do that thing, you will end up doing that thing. You teach by doing more than you do by saying, right? So parents program us more with what they do than what they say, right? So if your parents dealt with, for example, let's say financial issues with fear, anger, everything, that is what you will pick up, and that is what you will carry with you to adulthood, right? So if your parents taught you to, every time you made a mistake, they yelled at you, they beat you up, they taught you that you're not allowed to make mistakes, and it's okay. It's not okay for you to make mistakes, because again, being beaten up, nobody likes that. We can all agree that nobody likes being beaten up. First of all, it's humiliating, and second of all, it's just, do I say disrespectful? Some sort of disrespectful, and also it's just physically abusive, and nobody likes that, right? So even though like most of us in this society of ours are comfortable with it, and they want to push the agenda that it's okay for parents to beat their kids, I still don't think it's okay, because I feel like there are better ways to communicate. And then, as I also said, you learn more from what you see rather than what you hear. So your parents can tell you, no, but if they themselves, they do those things, what is going to stop you from doing it, right? So again, if now every time you made a mistake, you were beaten up, all those things, you learn that mistakes mean bad. Mistakes mean punishment. So then what will push you to want to do things that might end up being mistakes? Because at the end of the day, sisi, what, like, everything that you do is new, right? You don't know the outcome. You don't know what is going to happen. So every time you're doing something, you might end up making a mistake, even when you clearly didn't want to make a mistake, right? And so if you have associated mistakes with punishment, the moment something comes and you're about to make a mistake, you either pull out or you start to get anxiety and you self-sabotage, because your nervous system cannot coexist with whatever is going on, right? So, as we said, your survival instincts will always override your logic. And so is your body's reaction. Your body will always react faster than your brain will, right? Imagine you were, for example, pricked by a small needle. The time that it takes for that impulse to travel from your finger to your CNS, and it's registered as pain, it takes like a very short time, like it's a matter of seconds. And that is before your brain even recognizes that, hey, it's just a needle, calm down. But whatever will have taken place by that time, you'll have felt pain, and you'll probably have screamed or jumped or whatever because of the pain, even though your brain will eventually find out that it's nothing serious, it's just a needle. But your body will always react faster than your brain, right? So what you do when you're healing your nervous system is more like convincing yourself that this situation or these circumstances do not equate whatever I tagged them with as a child or at a certain point in my life. Going back to my example of punishment. So for that person who grew up in such a household, coming back or healing their nervous system means that they stop tagging mistakes with punishment, and they start seeing mistakes as stepping stones to success, as things that they must go through before something good comes along, right? And that means that their nervous system will no longer feel like it's a threat to do something. Instead, it's going to feel like an experience that they look forward to doing. And that is what creates the difference, because it also changes how you show up, right? If you're showing up somewhere in fear, you will show up wishy-washy. You won't show up as your best self, But if you're showing up somewhere looking forward to having that experience, you show up with energy, and you show up excited, and you show up happy, and you show up ready to do something, right? Your amygdala, we have it's a part of the brain, and it's the emotional alert system. It's the one that figures out, not really figures out, but registers that something has emotionally hurt you or not. And I always say that, okay, all of us are emotional beings as humans. We are emotional before we are logical. And that's true for everybody. And our amygdala is like the emotional whatever signal. It's the one that catches them, right? And then we have the prefrontal cortex. Now, this one is the one that helps you figure out your logic, your reasoning, and your self-control, right? And your prefrontal cortex will always be overshadowed by your amygdala. So if something happens right now and your amygdala, labels it as something that is supposed to make you sad, even though your prefrontal cortex knows that logically that something is not that bad and it's not supposed to make you feel the way you do, your amygdala will not stop firing because your prefrontal cortex knows that. Your amygdala will always override your prefrontal cortex. Okay. Then what happens is when something happens and it triggers you, your prefrontal cortex shuts down. Okay, it goes off, and then your amygdala goes on, and it's like an ambulance. It's like wee, 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 all the time, and so your body cannot focus on anything else rather than eliminating the danger. Now imagine the danger is force, because again, this is something that is coming up from patterns from the past, right? Here, we are also like pattern beings. Okay, we are led by patterns. We recognize patterns and we follow patterns. And subconsciously, we follow more patterns that than we may think. Okay? Also say like we get like a whole lot of information within 1 second through our ears, our eyes, our noses, and everything. And then our brain does the good job of filtering all that out and only rendering to us what is relevant and what is important to us, right? So imagine your brain is working this much behind the scenes, behind your own knowledge, right? So these patterns are running your life constantly every single day, and you have no idea, which is why the point is not to ever get triggered. Of course, we will always get triggered because situations happen and they obviously don't sit right with us a lot of the times. But the point is, what or how fast can you come back to your natural state or your baseline? How fast can you return to baseline after somebody has activated your stress response, right? Or something has activated your stress response. The point is, how soon can you come back to being yourself, And also, healing takes time. It takes repetition. Again, as we said, we are pattern beings. So of course, for you to create a new habit, you have to have like a series of new patterns for your mind to register it as a new habit. I was telling my friend the other day, if you want to, for example, wake up at 4 a.m. every day, it will take you maybe a week or two of struggling to wake up at 4 a.m. But after those 2 weeks, it's going to be your new baseline. It's going to be your new normal. You probably won't even need an alarm to get up at 4 a.m. because your circadian rhythm will have aligned with that, right? The same way with all the other parts of our brains, they need repetition. The brain is a muscle, and the more you work it out, the more it starts to work. The more it works on itself, the more you work it out. So you have to repeat a lot of new patterns so many times. You have to catch yourself in the middle of a reaction and tell yourself, no, it's not worth it. Relax, right? You have to catch yourself in the middle of, let's say, maybe making a poor decision, maybe self-sabotaging because of past fears. And you tell yourself, hey, no, actually, I deserve this chance. I should work for this chance because I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Okay. Also, with repetition comes consistency, because as we said, it's a pattern and you have to be consistent with it. You have to do it over and over again, regardless of how tired you are, regardless of how triggered you feel. You have to return to baseline all the time. You have to return yourself before it becomes automatic. You have to push it, right? Then you have to teach yourself what is safe again, because now your body doesn't know what is safe at this point. We've come from you tagging safe things being unsafe. Now we are at a point where you're starting to discard that old pattern. You're like, no, actually, this is not unsafe. This is safe. Let me try it. So now you have to teach yourself that taking risks is actually safe. And that means you have to take as many risks as you can, regardless of the results. As many risks as you can, regardless of what comes out of them, regardless of whether the results are positive or negative. You have to keep taking those risks. Because now then is when you're going to be training, because in that process is when you're going to be training your brain to accept things as safe, And again, you see, your brain likes safe things, it likes familiar things, and it likes safe things. So it doesn't like unfamiliar things, and it doesn't like unsafe things, because its primary objective is to keep you safe. It's to make sure that you're safe, right? So if something is tagged as dangerous or something that is going to make your nervous system dysregulated, it's just logical for your body to not want to do that thing, right? But if something is tagged as safe and exciting and something you look forward to, it's just logical for your brain to want to do that thing. Okay. Then this means that your nervous system, the way it is, it leads to you having like different attachment styles, right? We've had there are people who are hyper independent. They just are either, okay, we can say they are anxiously avoidant, but they can be anxiously avoidant or not. Though I feel like most hyper independent people are anxiously avoidant, because this means that they don't want to put themselves in situations where their emotions, or in situations where they're vulnerable or their emotions are prone to change. We have people who are hyper independent, and most people who are hyper independent are somehow anxiously attached, but it's different, because for them, they do not care about connections working or not. They just care about what it makes them feel. And if it makes them feel uncomfortable, they're not going to try and make things work out. That's the point. They just withdraw and go back to themselves. It might look good from the outside looking in, but if you're a person who has experienced hyper independence, you know how tiresome it can be, because we're social beings and we humans crave connection. And if you always break off connections at the slightest of inconvenience, that means you don't have so many, right? And so that can be very detrimental to your social life, and nobody likes that. So then we have the anxious attachment style, or the people who are anxiously attached. Now, these are people who must be in a connection. And I feel like if I were to choose between being hyper independent and anxiously attached, oh Lord, I would rather be hyper independent, because anxiously attached people, they just want to have somebody. They just want to feel like they're with somebody. And sometimes these people end up tolerating very weird stuff, because at the end of the day, they can't be by themselves. And I feel like the greatest cure for this is learning to be comfortable with being alone. Be comfortable with being alone. I always say that being alone doesn't equate loneliness. it doesn't. Being alone, you can be alone and happy. Like, and that is why I always tell people, like, develop hobbies that you don't really mean to monetize, but they're things that make you happy. Like, you don't have to do everything for money. Sometimes do things for yourself. Do something to make you happy. Go paint. Do something, like, learn to be with yourself. Because when you do that, you teach yourself that the hole that you're trying to fill in with the other people outside, because you always have to be connected with someone, you don't need to. You can be your own safe space, and you can fill in that void that you're trying to fill in with other people just by yourself. Okay. And then there are other people who just are emotional suppressors. Like, they feel something, but they don't want to express it. Maybe because they're afraid. Especially this is for people who their emotions were always met with no, not being validated. Maybe they try to express themselves as kids, and their parents are always telling them how invalidated invalidating their feelings and telling them how they shouldn't be feeling how they are feeling. And that teaches you that your feelings are actually not valid, and that you're overreacting at every slight time that you feel off about something. And when this happens over and over again, this child becomes somebody who suppresses how they feel, right? So they might be feeling really hurt by something, but they just can't talk about it, or they can't even tell anybody about it, because they think that the emotions are a burden to other people, and emotions are something that you keep to yourself, which is not true. Emotions are meant to be expressed in whichever way possible, creatively, or whichever way you choose to express them. Emotions are meant to be expressed and alchemized. It's energy. You need to use it. You need to transform that energy. And then we have the people pleasers. Now, these are people who, I would say, maybe something similar to like the emotional suppressors, but only that they become the polar opposites. Now, for these ones, there are people who will make themselves into an actual rug for other people to step over, just because they feel like they need to do that so that they can keep the peace, right? And keeping peace is beautiful. We all need to keep peace, but not at your own expense. Like, if it's at your own expense that there has to be peace, let there not be peace. Okay? If it costs you something for there to be understanding, then let there not be understanding, right? Letting yourself be picked at, and picked apart just so that people feel better around you is not going to help you at all. You should be somebody who has boundaries, somebody who has likes and dislikes, somebody who knows what they want and what they don't, somebody who knows what they tolerate and what they don't tolerate, somebody who knows how far they can go and how far they can't go, right? And that takes a lot. It takes a lot, especially for people pleasers. Like, I know it's easy, somebody can just tell you, but like, I understand how being a people pleaser is painful, because you really want other people to see you as a good person, because that is what it all stems down to. You want other people to think you're such a good person. But I always say, like, perception is built. And again, it's not your job to help people perceive you. If I saw you right now, I can perceive you in whichever way that I want to, right? And no matter what you say or what you do, I don't think I'll be changing my mind anytime soon, right? So let people perceive you how they want to perceive you. Let what leads to your perception be your actions and your words, not you doing mental gymnastics trying to make people feel you or like you or think that you're a good person. It really is not that important. And then now also with those four, now I feel like they all have a similar way of recovering, which is just teaching yourself that yes, those things happened then, but they're not happening now. Okay. Yes, every time I expressed my emotions, then my parents screamed at me, but they're not here to scream at me now. So let me express my emotions, right? That is the only way you get to change. It's just like, it's simply like a snap of a finger. Like, yesterday I was like this, and today I'm going to be different. It's as simple as that. And I always see people in the comments talking about, yes, you always tell us our problems or you never tell us how to fix them. Nobody can tell you how to fix yourself. Actually, you don't need fixing. Nobody can tell you how to switch from an unhealed nervous system to a healed one. Nobody can guide you and hold your hand through the process. It's something you have to do for yourself. It's something you have to wake up and decide. Not even wake up and decide. Every single minute something different happens. You have to train your mind consciously that, hey, no, it's not this, it's this, right? Also, your body might learn that something overwhelming is normal, right? And again, I always say, reality is very subjective, right? The things that somebody else might have gone through, to me, I might hear them and I'm like, what? You actually survived that? Or I tell somebody, I went through this and how did you even come out of it? You see, like reality is very subjective. Our experiences are also very different and very subjective. And your body might learn that things that are actually very extreme and out of pocket are normal. Because, for example, let's say, for example, people who grow up in a cult. Do you see how extreme cults are? And you're like, how did somebody even fall for this? You know? But it's very easy for anybody to fall for these things because your brain has its own threshold of experiences. And some people have been through terrible things. And so their nervous system, it is used to overwhelming stuff. And it can label that as normal and okay, even if it actually is not. And it's very unhealthy. That is why when you make see somebody who is struggling and they're not seeking help and you are like, why are you not seeking help? Why are you not talking? Because that's their reality. And in their reality, help might feel very far from them, right? And what you can do as a person outside looking in is just tell them that there is help. If they feel ready to look for the help, they will. And if they don't, someday they will, probably, but you can't. And I was telling myself, the day I started to deconstruct religion the first time, I remember I wanted to tell everybody, I wanted to save everybody, I wanted to, share this new important message with everybody. But then it got to a point and I was like, no, you can't change somebody's mind. You can't. And also this applies in communicating in relationships. I usually watch Love Island, and I watch Love Island as a social experiment because I like to see the way people think and the way people navigate in some situations. So for Love Island, I see how things like whatever we are talking about today play out, like having a regulated nervous system versus an unregulated one, right? So, for example, the way you communicate with people, even not in relationships, relationships is the best setting to study this. Like somebody can be doing things and you're trying to tell them, hey, I don't know, maybe I'm just going to use a very practical example. I don't know how to put this, but so, for example, in this current season of the US series, there is this couple, the Casey and who is this chick? Anaya. So Anaya is, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to give my opinion on the show, but I feel like you could see the disconnect between when Anaya was trying to communicate how she felt during that challenge where Charlie's brother slimed Casey. And Casey was also trying to communicate something with Anaya, but it's like they were not hearing each other, and it's like whatever the problem that is between them, it's very solvable. Like Casey has this clear problem that is trying to communicate to Anaya, but the moment it reaches Anaya, she understands it as something totally different. The same way Anaya has something very, very, very serious to talk about. And I feel like her feelings are valid. And I don't like the way most people are trying to invalidate her because I understand where she's coming from. And she has those, she has her idea and she has packaged it well and her communication is good. But there is a disconnect between the two. Even if they're speaking face to face with each other, you can see that these people are not understanding each other. And the thing is, it's not even something big. It's not a big problem. It's just a tiny misunderstanding. And I feel like it's going to lead to the couple being broken up, but it's okay. So I was using that example to let you all know that, yes, you can be very familiar with a person, and you can be very connected emotionally, and you can have the best conversations ever. But there is always an understanding gap between one person and the other because of our own programming, right? Because again, as we said, reality is very subjective. So your words, how you say them, they don't necessarily reach to me with your meaning. They don't come to me how exactly you meant them to be. They come to me how I think those words mean. And I feel like it's also played into by also how I see you as a person. Because if I see you as a rude person, everything you say, I will always tag it with a tone rude, with a rude tone, even if you actually didn't mean to be rude. If I see you as a nice person, even if you said something rude, I might see it as something nice because I don't see you as a rude person. I don't see you being capable of saying that. And also, remember when we were doing those illusions segments, those illusion segments were supposed to show us how much of our reality is constructed by our brain in real time and how subjective it is. So this all leads to us knowing that healing is not removing stress. It's not saying that you will never have stress. It's not saying that you will never have situations where you're feeling overwhelmed. Of course, that will happen. Healing is expanding our capacity to stay regulated during stress and return to calm faster than normally. Yes, so thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I'm so glad that you all are here, and see you next time. Bye.